Good morning everybody. So I want to show you, now that I've made my handle, how to attach my handle. So I let my handle get to leather hard, so there's still a little tiny bit of give in the handle, but it doesn't like immediately flop down, right? So it is nicely leather hard. So when you go to attach this, it's a good idea if you have a seam on your tumbler or mug or whatever it is you're adding on your handle. If you can, it's a good idea to attach your handle across the seam. Now, if you have a spout like mine, you want to attach your handle across from the spout as well. And because I knew I was going to do that, I made my spout and my seam line up. Okay. So now this is leather hard, my handle's leather hard. So now I'm going to attach the two together. So I do want to figure out, you know, where do I want stuff? What looks really nice? Now, because this is a picture, I don't need this to go all the way to the bottom. It doesn't have to, but I do want it to look like visually pleasing. So I don't want it to be like super crazy giant. I don't want it to be super crazy skinny. I feel like this looks pretty good like this, okay? So I'm gonna attach mine that way. Now, one thing you wanna think about is like with a picture, if you had it come way up above, like if I had it brought it all the way up here, on a picture, that's not that big of a deal. But if you're gonna be using a mug every day, think about how it goes in the dishwasher. If you have the handle stick up above and you're gonna put it in the dishwasher, every time you turn it upside down, you're probably gonna knock the handle off and then you're not gonna have a mug anymore. So you really wanna, if you're doing like a cup, you wanna make sure that the handle is below the lip of the cup. And it can go from top to bottom on, you know, a mug or a tumbler or something, but it doesn't have to, but it does need to be comfortable in your hand. The other thing is you want to make sure that it's big enough that when you put your fingers in, your fingers aren't going to rest up against the side here. But you also don't want your fingers like way out here, because then it's awkward to drink out of, okay? So really you got to find that happy medium where your fingers are close to, but not touching the side of the pot when you're holding your handle. And do remember that clay does shrink. So if you make yours like just barely, it's going to shrink in the kiln and then you're going to be actually touching it. Okay. So what I want to do is make sure I'm in the appropriate spot. And then I want to kind of like lean back a little bit and take a look at the shape. Like, I think for this particular shape, I think it would look nice if I had the handle start right at this join mark. And I think I actually, yeah, I think I'm gonna have it come down a little bit. Maybe I'll go like that. Yeah, I think that'll be good. So once you have an idea of where you want it to be, you are going to trace around it. Here we go, tracing around it. Now I'm just gonna attach the top one first. So I traced around where I was gonna do it, and now when I score this, I'm gonna score bigger than the mark that I made, okay? It's really important that you score like bigger than the mark, okay? If you only score just barely up to the mark, everybody's always like, well, I did slip and score, Missy. Yeah, it usually, if you only do just up to the mark, it usually doesn't work out well. Because you think you did, but like the edges start to pull apart, and then that's just not fun. So I scored this bigger than my mark that I made, and then I'm also gonna score on this side. Now I've been kind of flopping my handle around a bit because I was showing you like different shapes and stuff like that. That is not recommended. Okay, don't flop your handle around a whole bunch. Where did I put my cup of water? Oh, there it is. So don't flop your handle. Like once you figure out what shape you like, don't flop it around a whole bunch. Okay. So now I scored the snot out of this side too. Make sure it goes all the way through the edges. Okay. You really need to make sure that it actually goes through all the edges. And then you're gonna kiss it like a dewdrop fairy. So, boing, boing. Make sure that it looks wet, okay, but not drippy. But you just wanna see that sheen, that little shine. So now what I do is I will squish this on here. Now, depending on if you're doing a mug and you have the form, like, you know, you can shove your hand inside. This one, I can shove my hand inside, but it helps if you have something on the inside to push against, so you can really get this on there really, really well, okay? You want that stuff to squeeze out, okay? Now, once you have this on here, you know, check and make sure everything looks straight. I haven't blended it yet because I want to get this bottom piece on so I can make sure my shape looks good before I blend it. Okay, so I think I'm gonna do it here. So I'm gonna mark it. I'm gonna slip and score bigger. So I'm not moving it very far right now because I don't want to wobble mine too much more, because I already wobbled mine kind of a lot because I was trying to show you stuff. So I'm not gonna wobble mine. I'm just gonna go ahead and score it. So I'm keeping it fairly close to the pot. Now, if you didn't wobble yours a whole bunch to show your neighbor, look, mine wobbles, then you should be fine. But kiss it like a dewdrop fairy. Bing, smooch. Make sure it's straight. That always happens to students sometimes. They'll go to start putting it on and they'll stick it on like sideways. And you're like, oh, that didn't work out the way you thought it was. Now this one, I cannot get my hand all the way down in there. I just can't. So, but I do still want to push against it. So that's where a tool becomes a useful thing. And so if you can get your tool all the way down in there so you have something to kind of push against, that's really helpful. But now that I have this in here, I can go ahead and blend out my goopy stuff. Now remember, like always with our clay, other clays are different, but with our clay, you do not want to add water for smoothing. The only water you want to use for smoothing is what's left over from slipping and scoring. And if you scored and slipped correctly, then it will have stuff that's squeezed out that you can blend with. Now what I'm gonna look for, once I've blended all this in, I haven't blended the bottom part yet, but I don't wanna take too much longer. So check your shape. If your shape is too saggy, or you don't like it, or you just want it up more, because it wasn't fully leather hard, you could add a little bit of tissue paper to support it over there. And then you could add like newspaper, or if you really need to, you could add a chunk of clay that's just gonna sit there and hold your shape until it's more leather hard, okay? So if you need that, you can. The last thing that I wanna add on is, I gotta find a little chunk of clay, is up here. If this looks like it wants to separate, then you wanna add a little baby coil in there. So like I can score it, whee, and then I'll score this, slip it like a dewdrop fairy, bing, and then you'll squeeze this in there. So support underneath, but kind of squeeze this in and blend it. And that'll help make this really nice and very strong. So you would just blend that in and then finish blending down here. And like I said, if you need a chunk of clay to hold this in the shape you like, that's okay. We won't fire it like that, but once it's set up for a little bit, it should be good. All right, go ahead and give it a try. Thanks, everybody.